This is the case of the people of the state of Colorado versus James Egan Holmes, case number 12 CR 1522. The record should reflect that Mr. Holmes is present with his attorneys, Mr. King, Ms. Brady, Ms. Nelson, Ms. Higgs, and Ms. Spengler, and the people are represented by Mr. Brockler, Mr. Orman, Ms. Pearson, Mr. Edson, and Ms. Teach McGuire. The jurors are all here. The juror who had an interview today arrived late. She just arrived a few moments ago, so we obviously had to wait for her, but they're ready to go. I'm assuming the parties are ready to go as well. Okay, let's bring the jurors in, please.
Your Honor?
Yes.
I mentioned this to Ms. Zagel, but I just wanted to let you know, I know that when Ms. Brady had discussed the issue of opening statement at penalty, she had asked the court for an opportunity to provide some additional authority, and I have a brief argument and additional authority to submit to the court. I can do that whenever it's convenient for the court.
Okay, thank you. Please be seated, everyone. The record should reflect the jury is back in the courtroom now. Good morning, everyone. I hope you had a great 4th of July weekend. Great. It's great to have you back. Thanks for your patience this morning. As I indicated, one of you had an appointment this morning, and she got here as soon as she could, and we're starting shortly after she got here, a few minutes after she got here. So I very much appreciate everyone's patience. Would the defense please call its next witness?
Your Honor, the defense calls Ryan Telford.
Good morning, sir. Could I have you raise your right hand so that I can administer an oath? You solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Please be seated. Please tell us your full name and spell your first, middle, and last names.
Bet. It's Ryan Wayne Telford. It's RyanWayne Telford.
Ms. Higgs, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Telford. How are you?
Good morning.
Mr. Telford, can you please let the jury know what you do for a living?
Yeah, I'm the Assistant Director of Pharmacy for King Soopers in City Market here in Colorado.
Are you also a custodian of records for the King Soopers Pharmacy?
I am.
And what does that entail, that position as custodian of records?
I oversee a lot of the regulatory and compliance aspects of record keeping with King Soopers Pharmacy. So, I do a lot of validation of records and making sure that what we've got is accurate and correct.
Are there certain records that, as a pharmacy, you all are required to keep?
Yes, there is.
Okay. Your Honor, if I may approach the witness with what's been marked as D-TR-92.
Yes.
This has been shown to me. I don't object to its admission.
Are you moving its admission?
I am, Your Honor.
All right. Pursuant to the stipulation by Mr. Orman, it is admitted.
So, Mr. Telford, in looking at that document, is that a, it's already been admitted, so is that a record of pharmacy prescriptions being filled for Mr. James Holmes?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And if we could publish that on the screen, please. And if we could call out the name and address first. So, Mr. Telford, can you, I mean, the jury can read it, but can you let the jury know the name and address for the person that these records belong to?
Yeah, it's James Holmes, 1690 Paris Street, Aurora, Colorado, 80010.
And if we could call out in the center the date of birth, can you tell us what the date of birth is for that customer?
Yes, it's 12/13 of 1987.
Okay. And if we could then, it's not going to call out too well, but call out the list of prescriptions over to the prescriber name, please. Yes. So, Mr. Telford, does this give the list of prescriptions that were filled by that customer at your pharmacy?
It does.
Okay. And if we can point out sort of the dates for the jury, the first prescription was, I believe, loratadine on December 15th, is that right?
That's correct.
And what year was that?
2011?
And do you see the prescriber name?
Yeah, that would be over on the far right there. That's Corey Lyon.
So when we say prescriber name, does that mean sort of the doctor that issued the prescription?
That's correct. Yeah, that's the prescriber, the doctor, the physician's assistant, the nurse that wrote that prescription, and that's whose name we filled that under. That's who issued that prescription.
Okay. And the next prescription is from when?
The next one down there is also from that same date, from December 15th of 2011.
And what is it for?
That's for fluticasone. That's a nasal spray.
Okay. Also from the same Dr. Lyon?
That's correct.
Okay. And if we can move down then to the third prescription, those two that were filled, what's the next date?
That's March 21st of 2012.
And what are those two medications?
One is sertraline and one is clonazepam.
Okay. And this indicates does it indicate the dosage?
It does. It does. That's the, following that drug name there, for the sertraline, for example, it says 50 milligram tablets, so that's the dosage of that particular tablet.
And then how many tablets would have been issued with that prescription?
That's the quantity that's listed there. That header there is QTY. That's, two columns to the left of the prescriber name that we were talking about. So in this case, it was 30 of each of those.
And then the doctor there?
Looks like Lynn Fenton.
And the next date down, also issued on that date was also a prescription for clonazepam, is that correct?
That's correct.
0.5 milligrams at 30 quantity?
That's correct.
All right. And the next date that Mr. Holmes came in and filled a prescription with your pharmacy?
It looks like March 27th of 2012.
And can you tell the jury each prescription, its dosage, and the quantity of tablets?
Yes, it's so on that date it was sertraline 100 milligram tablets, number 30 of those, and then also propranolol, a 10 milligram tablet, 60 of those.
Okay. And also both by Dr. Lynn Fenton, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
And then if we can go down to the next date, what's the next date a prescription was filled?
The next date is April 24th of 2012.
And what was that for?
That's also for sertraline 100 milligram tablets, 45 of those from Dr. Fenton.
And then the last date that a prescription was filled?
That's May 27th of 2012, also for sertraline 100 milligram tablets, number 45 of those from Dr. Fenton.
Okay. Thank you very much. I don't have any further questions for you. We can take that down. I don't know if the prosecution has any questions for you.
Mr. Orman, do you have any cross-examination for this witness?
These may seem like obvious questions, but you don't know actually if the defendant took the drugs, right?
No, this would just indicate that they were picked up and paid for.
And regarding the sertraline, you don't know if he actually stopped taking it in May.
No, that's just when our records stop. This is, the time, based on this information, that's just when it was picked up last.
Because the pharmacy doesn't keep a record of a person's actually taking their medications or when they stop, correct?
No, not unless that's communicated to us from the physician, but that wouldn't be indicated on this.
Well, I mean, like you give pills to somebody, whether they take them or not is not a record King Soopers keeps.
That's correct.
Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Is there any redirect?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
And the jury does not appear to have any questions for this witness. May this witness be released from his subpoena?
Yes, he may.
Is there any objection, Mr. Orman?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, sir, thank you. Call your next witness, please. Yep. Morning. Morning. Could I have you raise your right hand so that I can administer an oath, please? You solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please be seated. Please tell us your full name and spell your first, middle, and last names.
Christopher Beal Colwell. Last name is Colwell, and first name is Chrisistopher. Middle name is spelled Beall.
Thank you. All right, Mr. King, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Doctor. How are you?
Good morning. Good. Thank you.
Thank you for coming to talk to us. What are you a doctor of, sir?
I'm a doctor of emergency medicine, and I work down at Denver Health Medical Center.
Okay, and what's your job title down there?
So I'm chief of emergency medicine, so I am in charge of the emergency department, both the adult and pediatric emergency departments, as well as the EMS system for City and County of Denver, and then the residency training program there encompasses the Department of Emergency Medicine.
Okay. When did you graduate from medical school and where?
I graduated from Dartmouth Medical School in 1992, a while ago.
And where did you complete your residency?
I did my residency here in Denver at what was then known as Denver General Hospital, that is now Denver Health.
Is the remainder of your experience and your publications and other information concerning your career contained in your CV, sir?
Yes.
What exhibit are we up to, if I may ask?
93.
93? I may approach the witness, Your Honor.
You may.
Showing this to counsel.
I will have no objection to this exhibit.
Are you moving its admission, Mr. King?
I am, Your Honor.
All right, without objection, it is admitted.
And is that what's just been admitted as DTR 93, a current copy of your CV, as far as you can tell, sir?
It is. It's been updated. I think let me check on the last date here. Yeah, I think I submitted this in October, and it's been updated with a few presentations and a publication or two, but essentially this information is the same.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask you specifically, sir, about whether or not, about your involvement with some possible treatment of a Mr. James Holmes in November of 2012. Were you working in the same capacity at Denver Health Medical Center at that time?
I was.
And did you come into contact with Mr. Holmes during that period of time?
I did.
Have you had a chance to review your chart notes that you made from that period of time to refresh your recollection about your treatment of Mr. Holmes?
Yes, I have.
Let me know if you need to see those. I don't know if you have a copy up there, but...
I don't hear just what you just handed me.
Okay. Because I can certainly provide you a copy if you need to refresh your memory about something. But in what capacity did you come across Mr. Holmes and when, if you can recall?
So I believe it was on November 15th.
Okay.
And he was brought to the emergency department for evaluation for a fever and altered mental status. And so I was asked to see him as a treating physician.
Okay. Were you aware that he was coming ahead of time? Were you given some heads up?
Yes.
And while he was there, did he, was he given kind of a different name for security reasons while he was at your facility?
Yes, I'm not sure when I became aware of what name was going to be used, but I believe he was given the name Brady, Arkansas.
Okay. And where did you first see Mr. Holmes, and how was he brought to you all at the Denver Health Medical Center?
So he was brought under fairly significant security
Right.
and back into one of our rooms in the emergency department that is more in the far corner. So he was brought to that room, and then I was made aware he was ready to be evaluated.
Okay. And what was the purpose at the time that you had in your evaluation of Mr. Holmes? What were you seeking to determine by way of that evaluation?
To see if, so in emergency medicine, our role is a little different from what other physicians might do in terms of we need to do an immediate evaluation to see if there's something that needs to be intervened on or treated right away. So if there's an immediate threat to life, or if there's something that could threaten their long-term outcome that needs very quick or immediate intervention, that's really my role as an emergency physician, to assess that and see what needs to be done right now. So if there may well be somebody who is ill that does need treatment over a long period of time but doesn't need something immediately, and we don't necessarily intervene in the same way that other physicians would over a long term. We intervene for more of the immediate issues or very time-sensitive issues. So my role in this particular case was to assess him for any immediate need for treatment or intervention, and then to determine what the next best step is. Could he go back to where he came from? Does he need to be admitted to the hospital for further evaluation, or does he need an intervention right now?
Great. And that was kind of my next question, which was, if it was, you determined that it was an emergent situation, would you treat him on the spot in the emergency area where he was at?
Yes.
And if you determined that he was fine to go back where he came from, would you have authorized that?
Yes.
And do you also make referrals to admit him, as it were? Can you explain how that works? If you were to determine that, hey, this is not an emergent situation, but I think he cannot go back to where he came from, what do you then do procedurally?
Right. So this is a situation where I feel like there's nothing that needs to be intervened on immediately, but it's not entirely clear what's going on, and for whatever reason the circumstances are such that I believe they need to come into the hospital, then or potentially need a specialty consultation or something along those lines, then I will call the appropriate physician, be an admitting physician or a consultant, and discuss the case with them, let them know what I believe is the appropriate next steps, and then we'll initiate those steps.
Judge, at this point, I'd like to qualify Dr. Caldwell as an expert in emergency medicine under Rule 702 in People v. Schreck.
Is there any objection?
There's no objection.
All right, without objection and pursuant to Rule 702 of the Colorado Rules of Evidence and the decision in People v. Schreck, which is cited at 22 Pacific 3rd, 68, Colorado 2001, the court qualifies Dr. Caldwell as an expert witness in the field of emergency medicine. What that means, members of the jury, is that he is now permitted to render expert opinions in that field. I remind you that you're not bound by the testimony of a witness who testifies as an expert. The credibility of an expert's testimony is to be considered as that of any other witness. You may believe all of an expert witness's testimony, part of it or none of it. The weight that you give the testimony is entirely your decision. You may proceed.
Thank you. And just to clarify that qualification a little bit, are you a psychiatrist or are you trained in psychiatry, sir?
No, I'm not a psychiatrist, and only trained in psychiatry to the extent that we need to do that in the emergency department. So we do have obviously a psychiatric component to our training, but I am not a psychiatrist.
And you all have psychiatrists available there to do consults if you believe that it's needed.
Correct.
What did you do to assess Mr. Holmes when you brought in? And first of all, how did he immediately present to you when you first saw him, if you can recall?
So he was restrained in the handcuffs and the restraint patterns of our correctional care patients, and then sitting up in bed, alert and ready for my evaluation. I tried to gather as much information as was available prior to going in to see him.
Okay.
And then went and did a history and physical exam as part of my assessment to determine what next steps need to be done.
Okay, let's talk first about the information that you had before you went in to assess him. I would imagine in an emergency situation, you don't always have a lot of information. What information did you have about Mr. Holmes, and what source did you have for that information, if you can recall?
So I don't remember the specific source. Usually it's paperwork that comes with them, and it's often written by a nurse or somebody that sent him in from, and in this case from a correctional care facility. We'll often get a note of some sort as to what the concern was and what information they had available to them. And if I recall correctly in this case, as I understood it, he had been hitting his head on the wall several days, for 2 to 3 days prior, had been seen and had a CAT scan of the head 2 days before I saw him, and that CAT scan had been negative. But since then, the staff that had been taking care of him or watching him felt like he was altered or different than he had been before, was not eating, and as I understood it, had not had any medications other than Ativan, which is otherwise known as lorazepam, a benzodiazepine that usually is given to patients to calm them a day or two prior to when I've seen him, but otherwise was not on any medications. And they were also concerned that he may have had a fever.
Okay. And what did you do then when you said that when he was sitting on the bed and alert, does that have a specific, is that a term of art, or what does that mean?
So alert means he was awake, looking at me or around the room, as opposed to somnolent or lethargic, which are terms to mean somebody who's sleepy or not responsive, not moving, and might indicate a more immediate need to intervene. So somebody who has a bad infection, and a fever could have been a sign of that is somnolent or unresponsive, would be a sign of something that I would have to intervene with right away, potentially either control their airway and breathe for them, or initiate medications, treatments to try to get them to be more responsive. He was awake and alert, meaning looking around his environment, and didn't need an immediate intervention in terms of his breathing or something along those lines.
Okay. Which did you do first? Did you obtain some history, try to obtain some history, or did you do your physical assessment first?
So we always go in and do an immediate assessment to see, again, if there's something that needs to be done right away. And usually within the first several seconds of an assessment, you know if you have to intervene immediately before getting any history. Once you have a sense that there's not a need to intervene within seconds, then you try to get whatever history you can to put as much information together so that you can make some sort of an educated assessment as to what needs to be done next. So it was the initial look, and then gathering what information was available via notes or whatever came with him, and then trying to obtain a history from him, which in this case was not possible.
Okay, and can you explain why that was not possible?
So when I would ask him questions, his response was either, it varied throughout the course of his stay with me, was either non-responsive. In other words, I would ask him a question, he just wouldn't respond at all, or he would say words that I called nonsensical. In other words, you could understand the words he was saying, but they didn't make any sense, and it didn't respond to the question I had asked.
Okay. Were they like English words?
They were English words, and the words, each individual word was something that you could understand, but they didn't make sense together. So they'd be a sentence that would involve multiple different words that didn't make sense together, but they were English words and you understood each individual word.
Do you have any specific recollection of anything that he said?
I don't recall specifically what he said.
Okay. So, did it appear like he was responding to you? In other words, did he say these nonsensical phrases in response to a question that you asked him, or did he just blurt these things out?
Both. So, and he never seemed to be really responding to my questions. Oftentimes when you ask somebody a question or a patient, they'll look at you, think about for a moment what you've asked them, and then give you an answer. And he would blurt out things throughout both the history and the physical exam, and would every once in a while seem to respond to acknowledge that I was asking him something, but it didn't always relate to what his response was. And again, sometimes he would not respond at all. Other times he would respond with words that didn't make sense.
Did he ever, was he looking you in the eyes? Did he at times look you in the eyes and give you the sense that he was talking to you or to somebody else? Or
I never got the sense that he was talking specifically to me. There was throughout the time there, every once in a while he would look at me as I approached him or went to do the physical exam, and perhaps there was some eye contact there, but I never got the sense that he was talking specifically to me.
Okay. Does this make your job and your assessment more difficult, I would imagine?
In many ways, yes, although it's something that certainly we're used to in the emergency department. There's a variety of reasons why it might be difficult or impossible for a patient to give us a history or all of the history. So part of our job is to be able to try to do as best we can an assessment, a complete assessment, and determine anything that patient needs with or without the history that they're able to give. And in this case, it does make it more difficult when you don't have that information, but it is something that we do fairly regularly.
Okay. Did he appear to be disheveled to you, or what was his appearance, if you can recall?
I would describe it as somewhat disheveled, somebody who's not particularly taking care of themselves, but we see a lot of homeless folks that have not taken care of themselves for many, many years, and certainly for a long period of time before we see them, and it certainly wasn't at that point, but it was the impression of somebody who was not taking care of themselves.
Did you proceed with your physical examination then, and what did you do in that regard?
I did, and so particularly in a case like this where we're not getting a lot of history or any history from him, you really at that point just do a head-to-toe physical exam, a complete exam that includes trying to assess every body part and organ system to determine if there's any abnormalities, and if so, whether that indicates a need to intervene now.
What of significance did you learn based upon your physical exam?
There were no particular findings, certainly that indicated a need for immediate intervention. The physical exam, for the most part, there were a few abnormalities with the skin, that type of thing, but nothing that indicated an immediate intervention.
Okay. Some minor scratches and things like that?
Correct.
How about did you have any blood work done, or could you determine whether or not he was dehydrated at all, or what the lab work showed?
I did. So I did what we call a basic metabolic panel and a complete blood count, excuse me, and then a urinalysis. And those are what we refer to often in the emergency department as some basic blood work. Not everybody gets that, certainly, but when you assess somebody with a fever and altered mental status, like a situation like this would be an initial set of blood work to try to see, again, is there something, this will identify usually something that needs to be intervened on right away, or something that indicates there's more treatment or workup that's going to be needed.
Okay. And what was your determination based upon that work that you did?
So as I recall, his sodium level, and that's part of that basic metabolic panel, was elevated. I believe it was 152, if I'm not mistaken.
Would it help you if I were to show you your notes
Sure.
to take a look? May I approach, Judge?
You may.
And I can show this to counsel.
Yes.
Take a look at that. I think it's like the second or third page there, sir.
Yeah, so this is the documentation of my history and physical exam at the time that I saw him. And I do write the lab work here, and it showed a sodium of 152, which is elevated. Normally, a sodium is right around 140. In normal blood work will have a couple above that or a couple below that, but 140 is about where you want to see that. And his was 152, which is above the normal range. And then he also had an elevated white blood cell count, which we call a leukocytosis, and it was 14.1, with normal being usually up to 10. And infections can certainly cause an elevated white blood cell count, but so can a variety of other things. So a 14.1 is in that range where it's elevated, but we're not sure if that's indicating an infection right now or a variety of other things that an elevated white count can be caused by. And then his urinalysis showed some ketones, which implies some dehydration.
Okay.
And it can be other things as well, but in this setting, particularly with the normal glucose, which he had, it implies some dehydration. And then I did a lactate, which is a sign of potential infection and growing infection, and that was normal at 1.1.
Okay. And you said that the glucose level was normal. Was that a 74?
Correct.
And so based on that, what was your assessment of what was likely going on there?
Well, I think it was at least dehydration, and we initiated some treatment for that. Whether or not there was an infection that was causing some of this altered mental status was the question that we didn't have a perfect answer to. The white count, again, could have been a sign of that. The fact that the lactate was normal was a sign that that may not be an impending infection. And his exam and assessment didn't impress me as somebody who was suffering from an infection of their central nervous system, which is the biggest concern at that point. I got a chest x-ray to see if there's any evidence of pneumonia, and then a urinalysis. Those are some of the common infections that people will present with: urinary tract infections, pneumonia, and then a meningitis. And he wasn't giving me the impression of having any of those after this workup, but it was still relatively early in the symptoms, and that can develop slowly over time. So my assessment at that point was, let's bring him into the hospital, continue to watch him. We don't need to intervene right now other than hydration, and see how he develops. And in many of those cases, they can come back to their normal state, in which case you can then release them, or they may develop something that is more obvious as time goes on.
Okay. And you mentioned some dehydration was evident. If you were to classify it at, let's just say, mild, medium, and severe dehydration, where would he fit in?
I would have put this as to moderate dehydration. He had they determined 4+ ketones. I believe it was 4+, which is a sign that there certainly is need for intervention enough to do IV fluids.
Okay.
There are some situations where we'll just be sure that they're drinking, and a lot of times we'll see in kids, they'll come in with mild to moderate dehydration, and you can give them juice and other things to mix that they like taste-wise, and they can take it orally without needing an IV, and that's a very good treatment. He was right at the stage where even if he had been willing to take something that I gave him to drink, I still probably would have started an IV and given him the fluids.
Okay. Needless to say, you didn't think you could give him a glass of water to drink at that point, given the state he was in. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Now, when folks come in with this mild to moderate dehydration like that, you said kids, would a normal, otherwise healthy male in their 20s suffering from that type of dehydration, would you expect to see any kind of delirium with them? Is it a possibility, or is that always the case? How does that work?
You can see that, but usually with mild to moderate dehydration, you don't see a delirium or an altered state because of that alone.
Okay.
We treat it to be sure, but in otherwise physically healthy folks, they won't usually start showing signs of altered mental status until you get into the severe form, and even then, it's until that severe form starts to cause problems with organs, particularly the kidneys, that will break down.
So you started an IV, and you decided to admit him, is that right?
That's correct.
And anything else of significance in your treatment of him? Was it you that made the referral to psychiatry, or is that something that happened later?
So once we made the decision to admit him for the medical reasons, then the psychiatry consultation, where appropriate, will happen as an inpatient. So I won't enact all of those things necessarily as the emergency physician when we know they're going to be admitted to the hospital. Had he not been admitted to the hospital, then I would have needed to get any appropriate consultation prior to him leaving, if that was indicated.
Okay, thank you. Let me have one moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
I think that's all the questions I have for you, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Edson, do you have any cross-examination?
We do not. Thank you, Judge.
All right, and the jury does not appear to have any questions. May this witness be released from his subpoena, Mr. King?
Yes, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No objection.
All right, sir. Doctor, thank you.
Thank you.
Call your next witness, please.
Your Honor, the defense calls Jason Morgan.
Come on up around this way, please. Good morning. If I could have you raise your right hand so that I can administer an oath. You solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Please be seated. Will you please tell us your full name for the record and spell your first, middle, and last names?
Jason Mark Morgan, Jason Marc Morgan.
All right, you may proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Morgan. How are you?
Good.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a registered nurse.
Okay. Were you working as a registered nurse at the Colorado Mental Health Institute at Pueblo in July of 2014?
Yes, I was.
Okay. Did you have occasion during your work in July of 2014 at Colorado Mental Health Institute Pueblo to meet Mr. James Holmes?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Can you tell me that the circumstance around you meeting Mr. Holmes?
Basically, I was a registered nurse and I worked on the float pool. So I worked various units and they asked me to work on the unit that Mr. Holmes was on.
Okay. Was he there at Colorado Mental Health Institute Pueblo? I'm going to say CMHIP for short.
Yeah, thank you.
To undergo an evaluation with the Dr. Reed at that point?
I wasn't sure of the exact reason he was there.
Okay.
So I can't answer to that specifically.
Okay. What shift did you work when you were working at CMHIP back then?
I worked what's called Shift A, which is a 13-and-a-half-hour shift, and I worked from 7 in the morning until 8:30 at night.
Do you recall how many shifts you worked during the time that Mr. Holmes was there in July of 2014?
2 shifts.
So how many hours then would you spend with Mr. Holmes
Like
on each shift?
on each shift, basically 13-and-a-half hours.
Were you with him every hour throughout the day, or was he in an interview during part of the day, or describe to the jury how that went?
Okay, basically, we saw him in the morning, and then when he would go back for, I guess, an interview, whatever you want to call it, and so he was with the doctor for, I believe it was about anywhere from 7 to 8 hours on both days. And then when he was done with the doctor, then basically we would sit with him.
Were you, was it kind of part of your job as a nurse there to engage Mr. Holmes and interact with Mr. Holmes during those hours that you were with him?
It was part of my job to interact with him, but I was never required to actually get him to say anything. We just asked him to do things, and that was pretty much the job.
Okay. You were not asked to sort of evaluate or look for specific behaviors or anything like that, is that right?
The only thing that we were to assess for was if there was any signs of him, wanting to do anything harmful to himself or anybody else.
Okay. What was Mr. Holmes' demeanor like during that period of time that you were with him?
He was very calm. He was very polite, and he did everything we asked him to do.
As the nurse on duty, were part of your duties to administer medication to Mr. Holmes?
Not mine, no.
Did you see that he was administered medication while he was there?
I did.
And did he do that without complaint?
Yes, from what I recall.
Okay. When you tried to speak with Mr. Holmes, what were his responses like?
They were very...
Objection, hearsay.
I think she's asking you to describe the types of responses provided. You cannot get into the contents of the responses. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
Go ahead.
His responses, for the most part, were very much yes or no, and every once in a while, he would add a little extra to whatever we asked.
Did he ever initiate conversation with you?
From what I recall, he never initiated a single conversation.
What about eye contact? Did he make eye contact with you when you interacted with him?
He would very much tend to look away if you made any eye contact. He seemed to be very focused on a spot somewhere within where he was sitting, where he kind of just would focus.
Okay. Did Mr. Holmes ever have any complaints when he was with you at CMHIP?
Not that I'm aware of, at least not with us during my shift in the 2 days.
Did he even ever make any sort of requests of you at all?
No. Whenever we asked him if he wanted something, he would just reply. He never requested anything, to my knowledge, that I recall.
What types of activities did you engage in with Mr. Holmes while he was there with you?
So we would basically watch movies, and then he would also walk out in the courtyard twice a shift.
Did you walk with him in the courtyard?
Yes, I did.
And what was he like on those walks? How did he interact? Any different?
No, nothing really changed. He was just all about getting his walks in, so.
Was he still quiet?
Yes.
Did not initiate any conversation?
No, he never initiated any conversations.
You said that when you would engage with him, he would sort of stare off at a specific point. What about if, I understand there were several other people that would work with you on that unit as well?
Yes.
Is that right? If you were all sitting down together, say, trying to have a conversation, where would he be looking? Would he be making eye contact with the people, or?
Every once in a while, I mean, he would make eye contact, but then it was right back to he would focus somewhere else. He would not directly keep eye contact with you.
Okay. Did he ever refuse to do anything that you asked him to do?
No.
Would you describe his demeanor as stressed out in any way?
Not that I could tell, but I'm not an expert on that.
What about, was his behavior at all arrogant or manipulative with you?
No, not that I saw.
Okay. Overall, was he respectful?
Yes, he was very respectful.
And was he cooperative?
He was very cooperative.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I don't have any further questions. The prosecution might.
Do you have any cross-examination, Ms. Teach McGuire?
Just one question, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Morgan.
Good morning.
Could you please tell the jury about what the defendant was like on July 20th of 2012?
Could you give me the actual day of the week that was?
Sure, in 2012, July 20th of 2012, it's a Thursday night. Do you
Yeah,
know
I
the-
can't give you that then.
You didn't know the defendant at that
No.
point in time? No further questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
Is there any redirect, Ms. Higgs?
No, Your Honor, there is not.
All right, and there do not appear to be any questions from the jury. May this witness be released from his subpoena?
Yes, he may.
Any objection? Ms. Teach McGuire?
Sorry, no, Your Honor.
All right, sir, thank you.
Thank you.
Call your next witness, please.
Your Honor, we will call Allison Owens.
Good morning. Could I have you raise your right hand so that I can administer an oath? Do you solemnly swear or affirm, under penalty of law, that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Please be seated. Please tell us your full name and spell your first, middle, and last names.
Allison Lynn Owens, ALISONLYNN OWENS.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Owens. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Can you tell the jury what you do for a living?
I am a registered nurse at the Colorado Mental Health Institute in Pueblo.
How long have you been working there?
Almost 6 years.
Did you have occasion during the times that, during the 6 years that you worked there to meet Mr. James Holmes?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And can you tell me the approximate dates that you met him?
I don't recall the dates.
Okay. Did he come to your facility on 2 separate occasions?
Yes, he did.
Okay. And were those for, do you know why he was there?
We weren't given a specific reason, we were just told he was coming.
Okay. Does it sound about right if I say that the first time he came to your facility was around August of 2013?
That sounds about right.
And then it was about a year later that he returned around July of 2014?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Can you move the microphone so that it faces your mouth, please? Thank you.
What shift, did you work the same shift during both of those visits?
Yes, I did.
And what shift was that?
We called it Shift B.
Okay.
It was the evening shift.
So what hours would that entail?
It was 6 p.m. to 7:30 a.m. And then the third day that we worked, it was 6 p.m. to 7 a.m.
Do you recall then how many, what times you would spend with Mr. Holmes? And let's start with the first visit in August of 2013.
What do you mean?
Sort of describe what your interaction would be with Mr. Holmes during your shift.
When we came on, we would sit in what we call the quiet living area with him for a few hours, and then he would go to bed.
Okay. As the nurse on shift, was part of your responsibility to administer medications to Mr. Holmes?
On some occasions.
Okay. When you did administer medications, do you recall what any of those medications were?
I recall Risperdal and Cogentin.
Would he take those without a problem?
Yes, he would.
How would you describe Mr. Holmes' sort of behavior during that initial visit in August of 2013?
He was polite, respectful. He asked us questions only to get needs met concerning the bathroom. to take a shower.
Okay. Beyond those sort of basic needs, would he make really any other requests?
No,
Okay. Did, was he a talkative guy when he was there?
not when I was working, no.
Okay. When you interacted with him, did he make eye contact with you?
I don't recall him ever making eye contact with me.
When you asked him questions, would he be able to respond appropriately?
Yes,
Okay. Were his answers lengthy, detailed answers, or
no, it was just yes or no,
so short?
short and to the point.
Okay. Was he ever inappropriate or disrespectful with you?
Never.
And on that first visit, did he follow all of your instructions?
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about the next visit in July of 2014, okay? Now, did he remember you when he came back for that visit?
It didn't appear so.
Okay. Was his demeanor any different on that visit, or was it the same?
It was about the same.
So still polite,
Still polite.
still respectful?
Yes.
Did he take his medications?
Yes, he did.
Did he have any complaints about that?
Nope.
Was he pleasant with you?
Yes.
Was he talkative?
No.
About the same as on the prior visit?
Yes.
So short, kind of one-word answers?
Yes.
Did his eye contact with you change at all?
Not at all.
When you would ask him questions or ask him to do something, where would he then look if he wasn't making eye contact with you?
More to the side. Look, he'd be looking in my direction, but his gaze would be to the side.
Okay. Did you also monitor him while he was sleeping?
Yes, I did.
And on that second visit, did you notice anything unusual with his sleep?
One evening, I noticed when he was falling asleep that he was moving his mouth like he was talking, and that's something I hadn't seen on any other times watched him sleep.
Okay. When he was moving his mouth, was there sound coming out?
No.
Okay. Now, did you notice any behavior that you might categorize as a little bit odd from Mr. Holmes?
While watching a movie, he was sitting on the couch and started to look down at the floor. His eyes became very large, and he was staring at the floor and then kind of crossed his arms real abruptly and then kind of shook his head and then laid down on the couch, and that was out of his characteristic.
Okay. What did you do in response to that? Did you ask him if he was okay or anything?
I asked him if he was okay or needed anything.
Okay. Did he seem like he was okay to you?
No, he did not.
In that sort of moment where he stared kind of oddly and quickly at the ground, did his demeanor change?
He looked like he got upset, a little angry.
Okay. And then quickly changed right back?
Not really. He still kind of looked mad when he was laying on the couch with his arms crossed.
And then what happened after that?
I think he asked to get ready for bed.
Okay. And do you remember which visit this was on?
I think that was the second visit.
Okay. And could you tell if there was anything on the floor to look at, like a bug walking across the floor or anything
There
like
was
that?
nothing on the floor.
Okay. So was it odd to you that he would stare at something when there's nothing there?
In my experience at the hospital, I wouldn't call it odd,
Okay.
but it's different.
Okay.
It's something that we kind of look for.
In your experience in the regular world outside of the hospital, would you call it a little odd?
Yes.
Okay. Overall, on both visits, was Mr. Holmes able to follow instructions?
Yes, he was.
And was that the only occasion that you saw his demeanor at all become a little upset?
Yes.
Okay. Other than that, was he always polite,
Yes.
always cooperative,
Yes.
and always respectful?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have any other questions for you. I appreciate it, Ms.
Okay,
Owens.
thank you.
Is there any cross-examination?
Can I have one moment, please?
Yes.
You don't know what he was angry about in that circumstance you were just talking about, correct?
I have no idea.
It could have been a wide range of things, including why he was there or any other aspect of the situation, correct?
It could be anything.
Judge, I have no further question. Thank you.
All right, do you have any redirect?
I do not, thank you.
And the jury does not appear to have any questions for this witness. May she be released from her subpoena?
Yes.
Any objection, Mr. Edson?
Objection.
All right, ma'am, thank you.
Thank you.
Call your next witness, please.
Ben Mendoza.
Good morning, sir. Could I have you raise your right hand so that I can administer an oath? Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes, sir. Please be seated. Could you please tell us your full name and spell your first, middle, and last name?
My name is Ben, B-E-N, Michael, M-I-C-H-A-E-L, Mendoza, M-E-N-D-O-Z-A.
Thank you. Ms. Brady, you may proceed.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Really well. How are you?
Good, thank you. Can you please tell the jury where you worked in 2013 and 2014?
My actual assignment was on the Advanced Cognitive Behavioral Unit, and it's attached to the Cottage, which is the least restrictive place at the state hospital.
And by state hospital, you mean Colorado Mental Health Institute at Pueblo?
That is correct.
And we've been referring to it as CMHIP. Is that what it's commonly referred to?
Yes, it is.
Did you have an opportunity while you worked at CMHIP to meet James Holmes?
Yes, I did.
Can you explain to the jury sort of what your role was at the hospital and under what circumstances you met Mr. Holmes?
Yeah, I'm a registered nurse there, and I actually was involved in both of the visits there at the CMHIP. The very first night, I worked a 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift, and so when I came in, introduced myself to Mr. Holmes. He was actually watching movies, and so my job was just to basically sit there and observe.
What was your impression of Mr. Holmes when you first met him?
Just real quiet, kind of had a very flat affect, gave like one-word answers when asked any questions, but appropriate.
Now, you stated that Mr. Holmes was at the hospital on 2 different visits.
Correct.
Do you know the purpose of why he was at the hospital?
Yeah, I mean, initially I knew because it was in the media that, so I knew exactly why he was there. And I also knew that he was going back for a reevaluation.
Okay, so it was to meet with Dr. Metzner the first time and Dr. Reed the second time?
Yes, correct.
Did you notice any change in Mr. Holmes the first time and the second time that he was there?
No, not really. It was much the same.
And I think you said flat affect. Can you tell the jury a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Yes, generally you see some kind of an expression on somebody's face, whether it be just a calmness or maybe kind of a gentle smile or something. Mr. Holmes, just his facial expression was almost like kind of meaningless. In other words, just like a stare, just kind of a blank look.
Did Mr. Holmes talk a lot?
No, very little.
Did you ever see him talk a lot
Never.
to yourself or anyone else?
No, if we asked any questions, again, it was just basically we received one or two-word answers was all.
We've heard that he would be able to walk in the courtyard. Were you ever able to observe him when he would walk out in the courtyard at the hospital?
The only time I saw that was on the second visit when I came in. I got there a little early, it's approximately 6:30, and he was being escorted out in the interior courtyard. I wasn't with him, but there were several staff that were.
Did he seem any different when he was outside than when he was inside?
No, not that I've observed.
Did you also observe Mr. Holmes sleep?
Yes, I did.
How did he appear to sleep okay, or what were your observations?
I made one observation in one of my reports that I noticed a REM sleep, rapid eye movement. I also noticed moments of sleep apnea where he would actually stop breathing for a few, maybe 10 to 20 seconds. And I also observed he moved his legs around quite a bit, which may or may not be an indication of restless leg syndrome.
Was Mr. Holmes on medications while he was at the hospital?
You know, I never was a med nurse, and I don't recall if he did take any meds. It was before my shift started, so I couldn't answer that question.
So that would have been with a different nurse?
That's correct.
How was Mr. Holmes as far as how he interacted with the staff? Was he polite or rude, or how would you describe him?
No, he was always polite.
Was he cooperative?
Yes, cooperative every time. If we asked him to do something, he would do it.
Did he ever not follow an instruction that you or anyone else gave him?
No, he always consistently followed instruction.
Any problems you encountered with Mr. Holmes?
None whatsoever.
Did he ever appear stressed or upset to you?
No. I never actually observed him looking stressed or... Again, my window of opportunity while he was awake was very narrow. So I didn't really get to observe very much before he did his hygiene ritual and went to sleep.
Okay. And like you said, there was really never any emotion he expressed.
I think on one occasion, it was just kind of a little smile, and I didn't know what he was smiling at or what he was reacting to. It could have been a pleasant thought at that moment in time. Could have been he watched G-rated movies. It could have been something like that. But I just did observe kind of a little smile at one point in time. It was real subtle, but that was it.
That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Mendoza. I'm not sure the prosecution might have some questions for you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Pearson, do you have any cross-examination?
Just a couple. Mr. Mendoza, the REM sleep that you spoke of, that's the deep stage of sleep where people dream, right?
That's correct.
And you didn't know the defendant in 2012, on July 20th of 2012, correct?
That's correct.
So you have no idea about any of his behaviors before, during, or shortly after the shooting, is that right?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Is there any redirect?
No, sir.
All right. It appears that the jury may have a question, so give us a moment, please, sir. Thank you. Would counsel please approach? Mr. Mendoza, the jury has submitted a question that based on the rules of evidence and other applicable rules of law I have determined is appropriate. The question is, As a nurse, what are your typical duties with patients such as Mr. Holmes during the day or evening?
Specifically with Mr. Holmes, on the first visit, it was primarily just to partially provide any kind of medical assistance if there was a need. If there was a need to do vital signs or anything like that. If I were the med nurse, it would have been typical for me to prepare the meds and provide them to him. We actually escorted him to and from the bathroom. We did not let him go into the restroom and close the door. We had to maintain constant observation. On the second visit, I assisted with the initial intake of Mr. Holmes, and I recall doing like vital signs, and I believe I filled out a form that's specific to Colorado Mental Health Institute of Pueblo. It's a Form 138. It just basically talks about current suicide ideation, kind of his thoughts at that moment in time, if he was feeling homicidal, suicidal, etc.
Any follow-up questions, Ms. Brady?
No, Your Honor.
Any follow-up questions, Mr. Pearson?
No, Your Honor.
May Mr. Mendoza be released from his subpoena? Yes, sir. Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Sir, thank you.
Thank you.
Call your next witness, please.
Your Honor, the defense calls John Gonglak.
Good morning, sir. Good morning. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, please be seated. Could you please tell us your full name and spell your first, middle, and last names?
Yes, my name is John Gonglak. It's John. Last name is Gonglach.
All right, you may proceed, Ms. Higgs.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Gonglak. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Can you let this jury know what you do for a living, please?
Sure. I'm an investigator. I work with your office.
Okay. I'm just going to be kind of short and to the point with you today. On February 28th of 2014, did you ask Mr. Holmes for any writings he had made at the jail?
Yes, I did.
And did he give you those writings?
Yes.
And Your Honor, if I can approach with what's been marked as D-TR-94.
Yes.
And I have a copy for the prosecution. Mr. Gonglach, is that a, you can go ahead and flip through it, is that a correct and accurate photocopy of the writings that you collected on February 28th of 2014?
Yes.
And Your Honor, we would move to introduce those writings.
Your Honor. Objection, hearsay.
What's the response? Do you want to approach?
Certainly.
All right, I'm deferring ruling on that exhibit.
Mr. Gonglak, do you recall a time in November of 2012 that Mr. Holmes was at Denver Health Medical Center?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Did you visit him during that period of time?
I did.
Was this in the jail portion of Denver Health Medical Center?
Yes, within the medical unit at the hospital, they have a more secured or what they would call, I guess, for inmates or people that were in custody, treatment center for them there.
When you visited him there, was that on, I believe it was middle of the day on November 19th of 2012?
Yes, it was like 2:30 in the afternoon.
Okay. So you had an opportunity to see the room that he was in,
Yes, I did.
see the bed that he was in?
Yes.
Were you made aware that there was surveillance camera in that room?
Yes.
Okay. At a certain point, did you receive footage from that surveillance camera of Mr. Holmes at Denver Health Medical Center?
Yes, our office received a copy of it's a grainy footage that was taken from the fixed camera in that room.
And received that from the Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office?
Yes.
Okay. Now, did you review that video footage?
A couple times, yes.
Okay. Were you able to see yourself on that footage when you went to visit Mr. Holmes on November 19th around 2:30 in the afternoon?
Yes, so the video that we had was like a continuous loop. It had it would pause if there was no movement or action in the room and then continue once there was movement. So I watched the video, and on it I did observe around that same time and date, you can see myself and Mr. Bishop enter the room, and then we sit down and speak with James, and then we filmed a short portion of that.
Okay. Was the date and time on the surveillance video that you received consistent with the date and time that you knew you went and visited Mr. Holmes?
Yes.
Okay. Now, as a result of sort of talking with him, did you then go back and review the video from the night before, I guess it would be late November 18th into the early morning of November 19th?
Yes, I did.
Okay. If I may approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
And this is with D-TR-95. And Your Honor, I've already given a copy of that to the prosecution.
Okay.
Do you recognize that disc, Mr. Gonglak?
Yes, this is a disc that I created, and then I also watched it again and signed my initials on it.
Okay. And what is that? Is that a portion of the surveillance video that we received from Mr. Holmes' stay at Denver Health?
Yes, so the portion that's on here is a short, it's about 30 minutes of a clip of some events that happened the night previous to my visit with him, and that's the part that I had copied and put on this disc.
Okay. And does it reflect Mr. Holmes in the room that you knew him to be staying in during that period of time?
Yes, you can see him on his bed. It's obviously him. It's the same room that I interviewed him in the day later, and it's him that evening in the early morning.
You indicated previously that there are points where the footage would stop when there's no movement and then start again. Is that right?
Yes.
So if this covered, an 8-hour period, the video wouldn't necessarily be 8 hours long?
That's correct. I believe it just records when there's movement. So if there was a time when there was a long gap of no movement, it wouldn't be an hour-long videotape of that.
Okay. Your Honor, we would move to introduce this video, and just for the record, it is without sound. Or
any objection?
No, Your Honor.
All right, without objection, it is admitted.
If I can have just one moment.
Yes.
I don't have any further questions, Your Honor, but we would ask to publish the video at this point. It's about 30 minutes.
30 minutes, okay. Do the people have any cross-examination?
No, Your Honor.
All right. There does not appear to be any cross-examination, and the jury doesn't seem to have any questions. let's go ahead and take our morning break before we publish Exhibit D-TR-95. Members of the jury, it's 20 till 11. Let's take our morning break. Please make sure you follow my admonishments during the break. I'll see you back here in 20 minutes, okay? So 11 o'clock. Thank you. The record should reflect that the jury has exited the courtroom. Everyone may be seated. And Mr. Gungblack, during the publication of the video, you don't have to sit at the witness
Thank you.
chair. If you don't want to, you can just sit back there, okay? All right, Ms. Higgs, do you have a copy of Exhibit D-TR-94 that I can review?
I do, if I may approach.
Yes, please. Thank you. Mr. King?
Judge, on scheduling,
Yes.
our next witness, this has gone considerably faster than I anticipated.
Oh,
this
that's good
morning.
news.
And so, our next witness is Dr. Raquel Gurr. I have, for Dr. Gurr, I've given to Mr. Brockler on Friday a series of demonstrative exhibits, which again, I don't intend to introduce, but would like to show during her testimony to help her to explain her testimony to the jury. I understand that he has some objections. I have a copy for the court, if I may approach, so that you can review them over the break, if you
Okay,
wish.
sure. Thank you. And Mr. Brockler, which specific slides do you object to?
Your Honor, I received these after 3 o'clock on Friday, had a chance to review them over the holiday weekend.
I think, did you mean Thursday or Friday?
No, Friday,
Friday,
Your
okay.
Honor. And I can't find, and I asked Mr. King if there was clarification to provide it to me, I can't find anywhere in discovery where any of these slides exist. Now, maybe Mr. King found them and he just has not yet told me about them, but unlike the demonstratives that were untimely provided for Dr. Hanlon's testimony, which included information that was contained within his report and something they called an addendum, there's nothing like this for Dr. Gurr. I've never seen these images before, these graphs. There are citations to studies, articles, authors. This is all a matter of first impression for us, Your Honor, and I think it's inappropriate. Even if it's not going to be admitted as evidence, it's going to be treated as evidence by this jury and given significant weight when it's put up on the screen for them. We've had really no opportunity to take these exhibits and have our own experts review them prior to their own testimony. There's prejudice here, Your Honor, and it can't be cured by saying take an extra 5 or 10 minutes to do it. If Dr. Gurr intends on testifying about some of these concepts, that's one thing, but to put them up on the screen and show them to the jury judge, these aren't contained in her opinions, and it goes well beyond the information that's been provided to us.
All right, Mr. King?
Well, Judge, it's kind of interesting that counsel objected to the demonstrative exhibits for Dr. Hanlon and now says that because these are different than the ones for Dr. Hanlon, he objects to these. Judge, these all relate to schizophrenia and the issues that relate to this case, and they're all the result of Dr. Gurr's own research and the research of her colleagues that work for her at the University of Pennsylvania. That research is contained in her CV. Counsel has had a chance to interview her on more than one occasion for several hours to ask her any questions he sees fit. These questions relate to her diagnosis and her opinions, Judge. For example, there are a couple slides that have to do with flat affect. And you have heard considerable testimony about Mr. Holmes having flat affect. Those slides relate to some research that she's done about how flat affect affects schizophrenia. There's also some research about what education can affect schizophrenia. And other than that, Judge, it's just general knowledge about schizophrenia, how it works, what the course of the disease is. There's a couple slides that show the course of the disease. There's a slide that shows just a picture of a brain cell, so she can explain how brain cells work. And there's a couple of pictures of the brain, so she can describe the different regions of the brain. All of the psychiatrists and some of the psychologists have testified about all this kind of information, describing their diagnoses and their various opinions in general about these larger issues that relate to this case, Judge. So I think that they meet the test for demonstrative evidence. They're relevant to testimony. They would help to aid the jury. These can be very complicated issues, and she has created these to help in her testimony to explain this to the jury. I'm not seeking to admit them, and I don't see that there's any prejudicial value to these, showing these to the jury that would outweigh their prejudice, their relevance, Your Honor, or any of the other reasons given under Rule 403. So again, they're just to aid her in her testimony, and there's no surprises here. So I would ask that I be able to show them to the jury and let her talk about them.
Where it says courtesy, Dr. Christian Kohler, Kohler, on one of these slides, and then it appears that some of the other slides may refer to other sources. Are these sources that she's relying on for part of her testimony and that the slides come from?
They are, Your Honor, and they're also, just for the court, not that it's necessary, but for the court's information, they're all people who work for her in her program doing research for her in this area. So they're all slides that come from her research.
All right. Mr. Brockler, I'll give you the last word since you're the one objecting.
I appreciate it. Your Honor, to suggest that somehow we've received a CV with a career's worth of research and effort in there, and it was somehow upon us to dig through that and cull out the specific diagrams and research that she would rely upon in her opinions, defies the discovery process, as well as this prior court's orders and the spirit of them in trying to give people equal footing to be able to respond to expert information that would be provided to this jury when we ask them to consider it. This isn't some silly thing of, well, you know, it's all part of her testimony. There's no good faith reason why these exhibits and this research, this specific research and all of these things couldn't have been disclosed in a timely manner. It is bewildering to me how they can show up on a day the court is closed after 3 o'clock and then show up Monday morning and say, there's no harm to this. They should have seen this coming. I should point out, Judge, that in the several hours I had to interview Dr. Gurr, and Mr. King will attest to this, almost entirely it was to try to get her to clarify what her written notes were, to transcribe them. We spent hours trying to get her to do that, because when I asked Mr. King to ask her to type them up, he demurred. So the idea that I could have asked her about these things, had I known about them, perhaps I could have. Perhaps I could have given them to Drs. Reed, Drs. Messner, Dr. Resnick, anybody to provide us with some way to now cross-examine her on this information, these studies. I don't have that today. This is a complete and utter surprise for which I am unprepared to cross-examine her on these things. They do not appear in her opinions. That's the reason why we have written reports and disclosures from experts.
When did you interview her?
I can't remember the exact date, Your Honor. It was months ago.
Okay, but it was before Friday, it sounds like.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Well, I'm going to take the recess. I'll take a look at them, and then we'll go from there. All right, the court will be...
Your Honor?
Yeah.
If I may, with regard to the P-TR-94, I just...
D-TR-94.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I just want to highlight for the court in response to the prosecution's argument that they don't know what these writings are, and the court can also refer to the transcript of Dr. Reed's interview with Mr. Holmes, which is attached to D264A. On page 470, it refers to them as galactic colonization, which I would note as the title. On page 471, it talks about finite versus, he discusses it on page 472. It's discussed as well as on page 473, the ultraception, which is also noted in the writings, also discussed on page 474. And so that can give the court sort of a context in which Dr. Reed discusses it to know that these are the exact same writings. I'd also clarify my argument that is also under due process, right to a fair trial, right to present a defense, and right to a fair and reliable sentencing hearing under both the United States and Colorado constitutions.
All right, thank you. The court will be in recess.